Good morning, everyone, almost afternoon. It's my pleasure to introduce the Honorable Roberto J. Rodriguez, who currently serves as Assistant Secretary for Planning, Evaluation, and Policy Development at the U.S. Department of Education, where he leads the development and review of the department's budget and advises the Secretary on all matters related to policy development, implementation, and review. Roberto's distinguished career in public service includes senior government roles in the White House as Deputy Assistant for Education to President Barack Obama, and in the U.S. Senate as Chief Counsel to the late Senator Edward M. Kennedy. Most recently, Roberto served as President and CEO of Teach Plus, where he built an equity-driven teacher leadership movement that engaged thousands of teachers to shape public policy and instructional practice to deliver greater opportunity for students. I learned from his bio that he's a Michigan native, the same state that I grew up in. And Roberto holds a bachelor's degree from the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, and a master's of education from the Harvard Graduate School of Education. So welcome, Roberto. We're really pleased to have you with us here at BU Wheelock.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you, Dean Chard, for all of your leadership and your work. It's wonderful to be part of this community at Wheelock, just a tremendous institution to support the development and learning and continued advancement of our education workforce. And I want to thank Boston University and Wheelock for their long years of leadership in that respect. And I'm so honored to lend my voice to this forum and to our conversation around teacher workforce policy and equity centered policies for education. We're in such an important, I can't think of a more important time for us to have this discussion. And I know you've been deep in the weeds on this topic and on looking at how we better advance the workforce and center equity over these last 2 days. So I'm pleased to have a chance to share some reflections here and then join a couple colleagues here on our panel as we talk a little bit more about implications, particularly for our teachers that serve our emergent bilingual students and our teachers that are serving our students and individuals with disabilities. There is no more important time to have this conversation because we know that the needs of our growing student populations are greater than ever. Here at the federal level, we have been focused as a top priority since day one on reinvigorating the partnership with our schools and college and with our districts, with our colleges and with our universities around the pandemic recovery and reopening. This has been a moment in American education where collectively, since March of 2020, we have faced unprecedented disruption in our system. We have seen some of the inequities that have persisted in our system for learners and for educators and for system leaders. We've seen those inequities exacerbated and compounded by this pandemic. And when we think about our populations of students with disabilities and children with disabilities and our populations of our English learners and our emergent bilingual students, that often the experience around teaching and learning has looked particularly different and it has been challenging for those students and their families. I think back to the conversations that I had even prior to joining the administration with a number of my teacher leaders. There's a tremendous teacher leader in Clark County, Nevada, who early in the pandemic, as families were struggling to think about how to engage with technology and navigate this remote environment, and all of our teachers collectively around the country were thinking about how to bring that pedagogy and that connection and engagement to students more effectively online. I'm reminded of one of our teachers who went to outside of her student's house, a student with significant cognitive disabilities, to be able to see and be seen, right? To have that physical proximity to her student, to be able to make sure that he knew she was there for him, even if they were going to be connecting virtually. Those connections that our educators bring, those relationships, they make all the difference in the learning and the lives of our students. And our young people need our educators today more than ever. And I think as a country, we see and understand. I'm a parent of 2 teenage students who had to navigate that pandemic. Many of our parents across the country understand in new ways, many of them, the important role that their teachers play in the lives of their children. Not just to guide their learning and advancement, but also to make sure that they are cared for, that their well-being and their needs are met as a whole child. So as an administration here in Washington, we've really centered, and the president has put forth education as being a cornerstone of his priorities, his domestic priorities. He's put forth unprecedented levels of spending and proposals in front of Congress to try to advance education. I'm going to talk a little bit about those today. And he's fought hard to make sure that we have the pandemic relief that we need. $122 billion for our K-12 education system to really fuel a stronger recovery and reopening. But as we think about that and we turn the corner there, we also have to think about what are some of the persistent challenges in our system that we can, through this pandemic, build back in a new way, re-envision how we are creating and instilling a more equitable system for all of our learners, and particularly for our bilingual students and for our students with disabilities. And part of that is tackling some of the shortages that we have seen in the system and the underinvestment that we unfortunately have seen with respect to preparing the teaching workforce for those classrooms and for those learners. We have shortages in special education around the country and in bilingual education, alongside STEM and career and technical education. These are the 2 most acute shortages in the country. And we know that over 44 of our states have large personnel shortages in special education. We know that 82% of our special education teachers who are polled respond that there's insufficient personnel to adequately serve their students. So we know that a lot is needed to double down on and prioritize the work that we need to support the learning and the dignity and the potential of every single student to access the opportunity in our system that we need, that they deserve to be able to prepare for success. Our imperative around equity and around supporting the whole child is grounded in and measured by our ability to do better, to move more urgently in the work around addressing and building a stronger pipeline of talented, diverse, well-prepared, ready to succeed educators in special education for our kids with disabilities, in bilingual education for our students, our bilingual students and our multilanguage learners. And we have to ground ourselves in what we know works in that space. And we have to ground ourselves in an imperative around making sure that we're building a profession that will retain that talent long-term for our learners. This has been a top priority for us from a policy perspective here in Washington, right? We have been working hard on an agenda that President Biden put forth last year, actually, to double the size of scholarships for future teachers from $4,000 to $8,000 as they earn their degree and prepare to come into the profession and serve in high need schools and districts. Proposed $2.8 billion to support grow your own programs and teacher residency programs, which we know make such a difference in that pre-service and early years. We have to do better to make sure that by year 4, we're not losing the number of teachers that we currently are in our system. And so that means we have to make sure we're more deeply preparing all of our teacher candidates for success and looking to models that work on that end, including making sure that we're doing better to support diversity across our teaching workforce. We know today that over 50% of our students across the country now in our public education system are students of color, and yet we are still less than 20% of the workforce. So how can we support more intentionally some of the institutions that are preparing and developing our teachers of color? And how are we investing in these high need and high demand areas? You know, the president's put forth a plan to say $1.6 billion we should be investing in supporting the paths toward certification for high demand areas like special education and bilingual education and other certification, and for our diverse teachers. And how do we support, once our teachers are into the classroom, the mentorship and the opportunities to succeed and to grow and continue to contribute in the profession. We have to move ourselves away from this one-size-fits-all profession that doesn't provide enough of our talented and accomplished teachers the chance to give back and contribute and grow beyond the 4 walls of their classroom. And so we have a robust set of policies that I think can be brought to bear to meet this charge. We're working hard on and so fortunate that we have a new budget now before Congress that we released just on Monday, this past Monday, that would double the amount of funding to $250 million for the IDEA Part D program. Right, that is at the federal level one of the lifelines of support to help partner with states in surging the number of fully certified personnel that are serving students with disabilities. And I think the critical question there is, how can we build into the roadmap that states set there and be a partner in shaping the types of policies and types of practices, and both in service and pre-service, that will equip our educators with the knowledge they need to meet the instructional needs of all students with disabilities. How do we think about prioritization of that? And how do we think about deeper partnerships in the preparation of our special educators between our colleges of education and our schools of education at the post-secondary level and our districts and schools that are serving students? You know, unfortunately, we are still too siloed in education, and we don't instill enough of that partnership between our pre-service and our in-service to be able to be successful. One of the things that Secretary Cardona challenged us across the country just this week on is a call to action to utilize some of the Recovery Act dollars, the ARP dollars, to support more innovative partnerships between our educator prep programs and between our superintendents at the local level. And we're already seeing great uptake and great interest across the country and examples of places where we can innovate to be able to prepare more readily a new pipeline of teacher candidates that will be ready this year to be able to meet the needs of our students, and particularly for our students with disabilities and our English learner students. We also know that we need more strategies to support our teachers that are serving over 5 million of our emergent bilingual and multilingual students. And there we've had long-time investments at the federal level to be a partner there with states and districts. And the president's proposed just this week a 35% increase in the Title III program, right, to be able to provide and part of that is think about our national professional development program within Title III that supports our educators of our students who are learning English. We have projects and priorities there around reading and oral proficiency. And we have projects there around thinking about parent training and parent education alongside our teacher education work. But ultimately, the work there around supporting our multilingual students needs to come back to what we know works in the field. What we've learned, there are decades of proven effective practices around second language acquisition. And our challenge at the policy level is how do we put those into play in a more effective way? How do we do more to support our districts and to support our institutions of higher education as they prepare our teachers to apply that science and research around second language acquisition, to learn from some of the greats like Cummins and Krashen and Nieto and others who have mapped the assets that native language learning and development bring to English language literacy and dual language development and success. We have not put into practice at scale enough of those examples in our system. And we have a robust opportunity with Title III and with Title I to do more of that. We have more of an opportunity to look to residencies for our bilingual educators and an opportunity to restore some of the previous investments that we've had at the federal level around preparing our paraprofessionals, around thinking about how we build a stronger pipeline into certification for bilingual teachers, as well as how we build the research and the faculty base within our colleges of education to really deepen their offerings and their certification around second language acquisition and bilingual certification. So I'm encouraged. I think there's a lot of great leadership out there as well, but we've under-resourced this challenge in our system. And we have to do much more to bring to bear some of the investments that are needed for this. And then finally, I'll just say, I think that, this is going to require a all hands on deck approach, and there's no shortcut to building the profession and lifting the profession to what it needs to be able to attract, deeply prepare, and support along at every point in their professional career our educators of our students with disabilities and of our emergent bilingual students. It's just a critical charge. And so, we need to do more to invest in the pre-service. We need to do more to invest in the induction and the success in the early years. We need to do more to invest in professional learning and in bringing our educators the agency that they need to be able to seek their opportunities to learn and deepen their skills across the course of their time in the profession. And we need to disrupt some of the norms that we have in our system, including that norm that isolates too often our educators within the four walls of their classroom, rather than giving them the time for collaboration and continued learning with their peers, rather than giving our accomplished teachers from whom we all need to learn. We have a wonderful example of that in Juliana Urtubi, who happens to be a wonderful bilingual education teacher and is our National Teacher of the Year. And I will mention a Teach Plus Fellow from Clark County, Nevada, and has just been fantastic in terms of an ambassador around supporting the language and learning of all students as an asset, seeing them and valuing them in their schools. we have to do more to lift those examples up and give those individuals opportunities to lead in their classrooms, to lead in their systems, and to lead alongside their principal and distributed leadership. So those fundamental shifts in our profession are critical if we're going to meet the charge that we're all gathered here and talking about over these last 2 days. If we're going to improve our teacher workforce policies and center equity for all of our students, it's going to demand really re-envisioning the education profession and the teaching profession and making those investments and challenging and moving some of those boulders out of the path so that advancement and success for all of our educators, it can be a reality. And we owe it to our students to be able to do that. It is still well prepared and successful and well supported and well compensated educator is still the absolute best resource that we can give our learners if we're going to deliver on the charge of equity and excellence for all. So thanks again for the chance to offer some of those reflections, and I look forward to an engaging panel and discussion with all of you to talk a little bit more about some of these issues.